Wonderful. I see a lot of responses. Thank you for answering that question. So we'll go ahead and get started. And the first piece of business I wanted to let you know is that we do have interpretation here tonight. And what that means is that even if you are looking for English, you still need to use the interpretation button to choose the English channel. If you are interested in having Spanish interpretation, please use the interpretation selection here you can see on the slide to choose Spanish, and you can get Spanish interpretation that way. So everyone, go ahead and choose the language that you wish to hear this presentation in, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to switch into the English channel now. All right, and if you are having any technical difficulties at all, please put in the chat, and we have folks behind the scenes. Andrew Oliver is here behind the scenes to help you out. All right, great. So I'm looking in the chat, and I don't see that folks are having trouble, but please do let us know in the chat if you're having any trouble with the interpretation feature here. You can choose English or you can choose Spanish. And our two interpreters here, I'm pleased to introduce Miguel and Jordan, and they'll be taking turns throughout this presentation and throughout the evening to help us translate into Spanish. And then I'm Jen Goldson, I'm a planning consultant, and we have Andrew Oliver here as well. Andrew, could you unmute for just a moment?
Hello, I'm Andrew. Nice to see everyone.
Great. All right, good. So let's get started. Some more formal welcome introductions. Councillor Marcillo, are you here to give your welcome?
Yes, thank you. I want to start by thanking everyone for being a part of this forum tonight to discuss needs and solutions for senior housing in Salem. During the last 2 years, I've been a member of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, where we discuss housing needs and creative solutions to meet the needs of our residents. Too many of our residents are spending 50% or more of their income on housing, which leaves very little left for other necessities like transportation, food, and clothing. In addition, we are seeing a shift in family composition and therefore housing needs. Families with fewer children or no children, single-person households, and the sharpest increase in older adult households. How we live as we age may not be how we wish we could live as we age. And understanding the needs of our older residents is why we're here this evening. This forum is the public forum that I've been the most excited for. I'm excited to learn more about how our residents want to live as they age. As elected officials, I and my colleagues have heard very clearly the need for senior housing solutions, but we lack the deeper understanding of what exactly that means. What kind of housing, where, at what price points, and what kinds of restrictions, if any. There is no single answer to this question, but rather a need for options. How older residents were housed over the past several decades may no longer be the desired approach today and in the future. Older adults are living longer, are generally healthier, and want to live independently for as long as possible. But living independently shouldn't mean that they're tied to a family home that's too large and too costly to maintain. It's sad to know that there are seniors who feel trapped financially in their homes when what they desire is an affordable, smaller home close by. This is a forum to allow all of us to help shape housing solutions for our older residents and our soon-to-be older residents, which includes everyone. That's the important message here. We're all growing older, and so we all need to think about how we want to live as we age. Thanks, Jen, and I'll turn it back over.
Great, thank you so much. Cassie, are you here to say welcome as well?
Yes. So hi, my name is Cassie Mascus, and I'm the senior planner with the City of Salem. And I have been very excited to work on this project since we kicked it off late last year. And I just am excited to welcome you all to this forum this evening to get your thoughts and opinions and questions answered, and to also invite you all to participate in some of our other outreach efforts that I'm sure Jen will talk on later. But we do have a housing survey available that you can access through the link on the screen or with the QR code. If you're smartphone savvy, you can just hold your camera up to that and it'll take you right there. And we also have meeting in a box opportunities. We would love to get your input and feedback through that way. Thanks.
This is great. And again, if you're having any issues with seeing anything or hearing anything, just let us know in the chat function and we'd be happy to help. Okay, so let's, I also want to introduce, there are steering committee members here who are part of the panel. And so what I'd like to do is I'm just going to call your name as I see you in the order that I see you on my screen. And you can go ahead and unmute and just introduce yourself. And if you're representing a specific board or committee, let us know that as well. Okay, so I see Patricia Zeiter first.
Hello, welcome, and glad you're all here.
And Patricia, are you representing a certain board or commission?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm the co-chair of the Salem for All Ages Committee here in Salem.
Great. And I didn't mean to switch that slide because it actually does tell you on the slide as well. Okay, good. All right. So I see Barbara Cleary next, and then it'll be Carol Hamilton after that.
Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say tonight, and I'm here in my professional capacity as principal of Cleary Advisors.
Great. Thank you. Carol, and then I'm going to go to, let's see, Lori after that.
Hi, I'm Carol Hamilton. I'm a member of the Salem Planning Board.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Lori, and then Amanda after that.
Hi, I'm Lori Stewart. I'm representing the League of Women Voters. I'm really excited to be here tonight, and I'm interested in hearing what everybody has to say for comment.
Great. And now we have Amanda, and then we're going to go to Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. I am Amanda Chincola with the City of Salem Planning Department, and thank you all for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments.
Okay, great. And Stephanie, and unless I missed.
Sorry, that's my second computer. Just have it open first.
Gosh, I don't remember a Stephanie on the Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, we're recording this in Spanish as well. So just some technical, strategy is to have a second computer going. All right. Did I miss anyone? I think that's all I see. Okay, wonderful. So let's get started in a little bit more direct way here. So we're going to have a bit of a presentation for you, but we'll also have ways to interact throughout, and we'll show you how to do that. But let me just talk about why we're here. And so the heart of the matter for why we're gathering. So you know that we're doing a housing roadmap plan for the city of Salem. And as part of that, we've been asked to look at housing needs for older adults in Salem and senior housing options as well. And as Councillor Marcillo had mentioned, how we wish to live as we age may be different than how we are living as we age. And so the heart of the matter is really with a growing population of older adults, how can Salem best promote and support senior housing needs? So tonight objectives are, we're going to first share some findings, some data, not too much, but a little bit, to just give you a sense of what we're seeing in terms of the older population in the community, and then give you some general context looking at Massachusetts and the United States as well. And we're also going to be providing examples of senior housing types. And then we really want to hear your perspective about housing needs, housing issues, and housing opportunities for seniors. And throughout the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to participate, including, and I see someone's already raising their hand, so there will be a couple of different points in the presentation where we'll pause and ask if anyone wants to raise their hand to be unmuted to speak about their feelings. And so we're not quite there yet. I see that some folks are ready to go, but we'll get there very soon. So Andrew, were you going to just pop in here and talk about the different ways people can contribute?
Yeah, sure. So there's a few ways people can you can let us know what you're thinking. We're going to have some polls that are going to come up, and there's a link you can see there that I'm going to put in the chat once we get going here. And we get to the polling section, and you can click on that link and you'll be able to participate that way. You can always share whatever you're thinking and respond to the questions in the chat box. And later on, there will be an opportunity for you to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you, and you can speak that way. So there's various ways. And then I think the next slide has a little idea about switching between the Zoom and the polling. And I just wanted to cover this because it can be a little bit tricky. The polling doesn't take place inside the webinar itself. When you click on the link to get to the poll, it will take you to your regular web browser, and then you'll be able to participate in the poll from your web browser. And, it may be a little bit confusing to get back to Zoom from there. So I just wanted to go over this just to make sure everyone's on the same page and doesn't get lost between different programs. So when you go over to your web browser and then you want to get back to Zoom, first of all, if you can still hear us, you know that the Zoom webinar is still running, so you don't have to worry. But if you need to get back and you don't know how, you can just go back to wherever you got into Zoom from the first place, wherever you launch your programs on your computer, and select Zoom, and that should bring you back to the webinar. And we're also going to stop the screen share of the poll before we go back to the presentation. And that also makes it a bit easier to see all the different things you have open on your computer at once. So when we're finished with the polls, if you having trouble get back to Zoom, we'll stop the screen share and make sure that everyone has a chance to get back to the webinar.
Perfect. Yeah, and Andrew's going to remind me to stop the share if I don't remember to do that. So hopefully that will clear things up. All right. So the other thing you should know is we're about ready to poll right now. We're going to ask you some background questions, find out a little bit about who's here. We see 40 attendees currently. That's in addition to the 11 panelists we have. And what we're going to do is ask you to either use your smartphone or your browser on your laptop if you're looking on a laptop. If you don't have the ability to do either of those, you can always email us the answers. So that's always a good backup. You can also put your answers right in the chat. If you want to. You won't see them immediately on the screen, but we will incorporate all of your feedback in our summary, no matter if you use the polling that will show up on our screen, or if you want to email Andrew, or if you want to just put your answers in the chat. So those are all options for you. But if you do want to and can use this polling, it's pretty cool because we can actually see what you're answering right away on the screen. It'll give us a bar chart or even your open-ended answers for some of them. So this is the way you can do it. You can either grab the QR code right on your smartphone. You can scan that right on our screen. You can also type into your browser. This is the URL that you would type in, pollev.com/Gen with 2 N's G. And the capitals don't matter. We just put that in so that you can easily see it. But you can do all lowercase, it doesn't matter. Now, if you do want to do a text, the phone, it's kind of like the phone number you text to is 22333. And then your first message that you want to type into your phone is Gen G, 2 N's. And again, the capitals don't matter. And then you just send it in and it will give you a message back so you know that it's working. Now, again, if you're having any problems, you can type in the chat and Andrew will do his best to help you out. And again, you can also just use Andrew's email, which, Andrew, did you put that in the chat already, your email? Okay, I think you did. And all right, so let's get going and we'll try out the first one and see how it's working. And again, if anybody's having any issues, just let us know and we'll do our best to help. So yeah, you can go ahead and start answering. So I'd like to know, are you a Salem resident? Just type in A if you're on the on your browser, you could just kind of click the answer. If you're on your phone, you can type in A for Salem resident, B for employed in Salem, and you should be able to choose multiple. So you may be a business owner and a resident, so you should be able to choose both. D, if you represent a local or regional organization or service provider. E, if you serve as a city official. And then F, if I didn't capture in any of these choices what you feel you represent. And so what we're seeing here, and hopefully you can all see this, somebody tell me on our panel if you can't see the polling. You should see it. Okay, perfect. So we have about 46% of respondents right now saying that they are Salem residents, and about 19% of you are, or 18% are city officials. And we have about 16 or 15%, the numbers are changing a little as you're answering, employed in Salem. Great. And Andrew, are we getting any issues in the chat that anyone's having trouble with this?
It seems that some people are having an issue where the survey is erasing the response. I'm not sure about that. Let me have a look and make sure here. Seems like they're coming in, so I'm not sure. It seems like most people are getting it to work out. I'll keep monitoring. And also, I was going to mention that at some point, Amanda has a couple other people she wanted to recognize who are in attendance that have joined the meeting the past couple of minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so while you guys are filling this out, I did want to recognize Teresa Arnold is our Director of Council on Aging here in Salem. I see her as an attendee, and we have several city councilors on the call. So I want to recognize them. I see Councilor Alice Merkel, Councilor Kellen Watsonfeld, Councilor, I believe I saw Lev McLean, Councilor Jeff Cohen, and Councilor Ty Hapworth. It looks like those are our city councilors on the call, and Councilor Marcillo, who's one of the panelists here tonight. So.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for jumping in with that. Okay, good. So now I'd like to know which of these categories would your age be in. And so A is 17 years old or under. If we have any young children or adults, young adults. 18 to 34 years is B. And you can see the rest. C is 35 to 44. D is 45 to 54. E is 55 to 64. F is 65 to 74. And that actually looks like the biggest representation we have here tonight at 36% or 35% now. And so far we have no one over 75 years. And then we have, it looks like even now between 55 to 64 years old and 65 to 74 years old. All right, great. Oh, and we do have at least one person, 75 or over. Great. All right, so it looks like things are slowing down here. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Giving it a second. All right, great. All right, and if you are a Salem resident, so some of you may not be, and I'd like you just to skip this question, but if you are a Salem resident, I'd like to know, do you A, own your home? I'm sorry, I said that wrong. A, rent your home. B, own your home. C, living with family or friends. D, unhoused. E, other situation. So far we have most people saying that you own your home. Right now it's at 88%. We have about 16% saying they rent their home, and we have no one choosing the other choices at this point. And it does look like the polling has slowed and almost stopped. All right, great, thank you. All right, and the last background question here. How would you describe your racial identity, your racial or ethnic identity? And you can select all that apply. So I have A, Asian, B, Black or African American, C, Hispanic, Latino, Spanish, D, Native American, Alaska Native, E, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, which is spelt wrong, sorry about that, and F, white. G, prefer not to answer. And so far I'm looking, it looks like 86% white. It looks like things have slowed down. We have 7%, 6%, Black African American, and then the others aren't giving me a percentage, but it looks like maybe maybe one person in each for Asian, Hispanic, Latino, Spanish, or Native American, Alaska Native. Great, thank you. All right. And so what will the housing roadmap include? So many of you may have been on our initial public forum back at the very end of November, right after Thanksgiving. And so we talked a little bit about this. But it will include a pretty detailed analysis, which we've been working on, and we've been doing revisions based on some review that the steering committee and staff have given us. We also are looking right now, as part of this webinar, as well as the prior one, at envisioning a housing future. And tonight we're really focused in on the needs of older adults when it comes to housing. And then putting it together will happen over the next few months. And so you'll see that we'll have a third forum coming up in March that will really talk about, well, what strategy options are there? And we'll want you to weigh in on strategy options and priorities. And so that would be the third public forum, which would be the next one. And so you can see the rough timeline here. We've been working since the fall. We had the first community forum on November 30th. Tonight is the senior housing discussion. And then in March, we'll have the third forum. And then sometime in probably closer to May, or maybe even June, depending on the counselor's schedule, we'll want to do a public presentation in front of the city council as well towards the end to get more public feedback on the draft. And so there are still opportunities to share your ideas. So there is tonight, which we'll be asking your perspective a number of times tonight in different ways. We have a community survey that is still live. We've left it open to increase participation, and the survey is available in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. So if you haven't taken it yet, we encourage you to do that. We have the project team holding office hours where you can go onto our website. I'm going to give you a link to that in a minute. You can go onto the website and find out what the office hours are. You can sign up to pop into an office hours and talk about the project, share your perspective. We also have the steering committee members hosting small meetings. And Cassie had mentioned this a moment ago. We're calling it Meeting in a Box because we provide a kit. And you can also host your own meeting. And so look out for that. And if you're interested in hosting a small meeting with friends or other folks you know, acquaintances, people you sit on boards and commissions with, other organizations, you can have your neighbors over. And really the idea is to try to get as much participation as possible by offering all of these different ways for people to give input. And then we'll have the third community forum, which is really going to be asking for your feedback on draft strategy options. And then we'll present the roadmap, the draft roadmap, as I said, in the spring. And so, Andrew, if you could, in the chat, just post the link for the website, that would be great. This is a QR code as well. You can scan. And you can find out through either the link that Andrew's going to post or the QR code how to take the survey, sign up for office hours, or even how to host your own meeting. And so these are all different ways to stay involved over the next, few months in this process. And so, the survey has been up since, I think we put it up in October, and we're going to keep it up until February 11th. So that will be the last day to take the survey. So please do help us circulate that. The survey is about housing needs, and it asks questions about what are your particular needs and what is your perspective of housing needs in the community. And the survey is anonymous. And so I'm hoping that we can get as many people in the community to participate in that as possible. All right, great. So I'm going to go through some demographic characteristics of older adults, and we're going to start with the US. We're going to talk a bit about Massachusetts, and then we'll talk more specifically about Salem. So the country's older adult population is really experiencing unprecedented growth, and by 2030, more than 1 out of every 5 people will be age 65 and over, and that will be outnumbering children in the country for the first time ever. And so this is some information that we got from a publication called Making Room. It's by AARP. And if you're interested in older adult housing needs and demographics of older adults in the country, this is a really great publication. It's called Making Room. And so some of the things, older adults may ask is, have you considered what sort of housing you'll live in when you're older and perhaps less mobile? Will you be able to live in your current home? Would you consider downsizing? Would you be willing to share a home with friends or a tenant? And we'll talk a little bit about all of these different options in a moment. But I also wanted to show Salem compared to the state, and this also compares to the county. So Salem's older adults is roughly proportionally the same as in the state. So you can see about 16% of Salem's population is age 65 or over. And this is based on the most recent American Community Survey data from 2019. It's the 5-year estimate for those of you who know about the ACS. And so you can see that 16% also makes up the state population for 65 and older. In Salem, one of the interesting things that's different in Salem is that you have a larger young adult population of 18 to 34, many of which, although not all, are college students. But if you look at the older adults, the 65 and up, it is the same, and just a little bit more in the county. So the other thing I want to mention is that if you look back over time, over the last roughly 10 years since the 2010 census, the older adult population in Salem has grown from about 13% of the total population in Salem to about 16%. And about 65% of those older adults are estimated to own a home, and 35% are estimated to rent a home. And you can see this chart shows the different breakdown of age. On the bottom, you can see people 15 to 24 years old, people 25 to 44, and it goes up from there. And then this last bar here is the 65 and over. And then the yellow part of the bar shows the number of households in that age category who own their home. And the blue piece of the bar shows the renter occupied, or the number of households that rent their home. And so you can see in the older adults here, it's a significant portion of older adults. There are about 1,600, a little over 1,600 households that rent who are over 65 years old, and about just over 3,000 households who own, who are 65 and over. And then we want to look also at their income situation. And so 22% of Salem older adults have income of less than $20,000 a year. And so that's what this map is showing. This map is showing across the whole state. And the darker blue is 35% or more, or 35.1% or greater. And then this next rung down, this deep blue, is the category that Salem fell into actually when this was done in 2017. And the data that I just shared with you, that 22% of Salem's older adults have income of less than $20,000 is updated. That's from the 2019 American Community Survey. The other thing that I wanted to share with you about income is that most older adult households, and by most I mean 55%, so more than half, have income of less than $60,000. And that's, again, the most recent data that we have available. There are almost 3,000 elderly households in Salem that would have what we call low or moderate income. And so for those of you who work in housing, you'll know that term of art that I'm referring to is equal to in many programs, but not all. But I'm talking about 80% of the area median income or under. So almost 3,000 older adult households in Salem have low or moderate incomes at or below 80% of the area median income. And out of those almost 3,000, 68% are something we call cost burden, which means they spend more than 30% of their gross household income on housing costs. And so that is almost 2,000 of those older households. So I'm happy to take questions. We're going to pause in a little bit for folks to raise their hand, ask questions, give some comments on this data. But that's just one piece of the data that we wanted to share with you. Another, and we actually saw in some of the comments, so thank you for answering the question on the initial slide, because I was reading your answers and they were, very observant without even having seen this presentation yet. But one thing we heard is people are worried about elderly households, elderly people living alone and being isolated, living in isolated situations, among other things that you shared. And so this is getting at that point. So many older adults do live alone in Salem. And so you can see from this pie chart, this is showing all the non-family households. And what I mean by that is you're not living with a spouse or children or anyone else who is related to you. You may be living with a roommate, and that's this kind of light gray bar. This dark blue here is householders under age 65 living alone. And then this kind of mustard color are the householders who are 65 and over. So older adult households who are older adult people who are living alone. And so that's about 45% of Salem households are non-family. And of those, 2,300 households are older adults or people are older adults living alone. The proportion of older adults living alone has actually increased, and this is really a trend that's larger than Salem, but it's really expected to continue to increase. The other thing I just want to point out here is that about 1,200, a little more than 1,200 elderly non-family rental households. So that's primarily elderly people living alone who are renting their homes. About 1,200 of them are low, moderate income households. And about half of those, so about 600 households, are what we call severely cost burdened, meaning they're paying more than 50% of their gross income toward housing cost. So I've thrown a lot of numbers at you here, but the primary point of this kind of portion of the presentation is that there are a lot of older adults in Salem living alone. That's expected to increase. A lot of them are renting, and a lot of them are also severely cost burdened. We also wanted to look at older adults who are living in families. And so one component of that are grandparents living with grandchildren. It could be that they are responsible for their own grandchildren. They also are situations where grandparents are living in a household with other, parents or other adults who are responsible for those children. And so this is something that we just wanted to point out. So the total grandchildren under 18 living with a grandparent in Salem is 357 households. That's an estimate, again, based on that 2019 American Community Survey. And then you can see about 114 households are grandparents who are responsible for their grandchildren who are under 18. We also looked at older adults, the estimations on older adults living with disabilities. So about a third of older adults who are, again, 65 and older, live with disabilities, and those disabilities vary from mobility or ambulatory difficulty, cognitive, vision, hearing, self-care difficulty, and difficulty living independently. And many individuals with disabilities may fit into more than one category as well. And so that about a third of Salem's older adults. So that is about just over 2,000 people. So it's 2,170 people is the estimate. And that is on par with the county and state. So that's not that's not unusual. But we just wanted to point out that there are over 2,000 people living with disabilities who are older adults in Salem. Okay, so now, yeah.
Before we go on, there's one question, and also Amanda wanted to recognize a couple of other people who are here.
Why don't we do the recognition first, and then I'll take the question.
Cool.
Counselor Conrad Przewski is also in the meeting. I'm sorry I missed you earlier, so I just wanted to recognize that he is here too.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, what is the question?
Grayson asks, do the statistics come from respondents from the Latino and LGBTQ and other minority populations, or are the statistics mostly from mainstream elders?
Yeah, so these statistics are based on the American Community Survey, which is a sample of everyone who lives in Salem. So we don't know exactly, who has responded as part of the sample size, because the sample size obviously is less than the full population. We'll have 100% data from the 2020 U.S. Census that we can look back at some of these points and get a count of everyone who answers these questions. But at this point, it's just a sample. But we don't, in theory, it should represent all of those groups, but we don't know exactly what the sample was that was taken, just because it is an estimate. So hopefully that answers your question. I know that's a little vague, but the answer is it should account for all of those groups. We just don't know the specifics of what sample was taken. Okay. So I also want to make just a few points about housing needs for older adults in general. And so living with disabilities or not, older adults have different housing needs. And Councillor Marcillo talked about this as well in her opening comments. Typically, older adults need, and this is a generalization, so this may not be exactly correct for every single older adult, but in general, older adults need and are preferring smaller, less housing units with less maintenance required, safe and walkable neighborhoods, and places that are really connected to people. And so in some of the comments we saw that you gave us in the initial question in the chat was that, people are living alone in isolated situations. People are living on a fixed income and struggling to afford their home. We also heard things like, older adults want access and need access to transportation and need accessible units as well. And so those are some of the things that you said. And so I think that you made some very good points. And that's part of what this slide is saying. To get a little bit more in detail, older adults in general are interested in housing options that are in vibrant communities as opposed to being sort of isolated in the institutionalized care, and just looking for options and alternatives to be in vibrant communities, to foster connections, to promote social inclusion, to have opportunities for purpose and engagement and volunteering. Also looking for and in need of accessible housing options, and options for aging in your current home, including options for and support for home modifications, and also for housing stability if you're facing rent increases and having trouble paying your rent, having trouble paying your taxes, or living in a home that doesn't meet your needs as you're aging. And so the other piece is looking for affordable options, both. And when I say affordable, we're talking not just about housing, but also services that you may need as you're aging, whether you're in a current home that you've been in a long time or in a new home in the community, looking for affordable options, both for housing and for services. And then looking for housing choices at various scales and various service levels. There's not a one size that fits all. And so having options within the community so that you can stay in the community, whether it's in your own home or in a new home in the community, having those choices at various scales and various service levels that really meet a variety of needs and preferences. And so none of this is probably that surprising to you all, but this is just a summary of what people are needing when they're aging. And people are, not all the same. And so that's why we have so many different things on this slide regarding different options for both downsizing options, different levels of service, as well as staying in your current home. And so in general, so this is a version of a slide that To Life used a few weeks ago in a presentation that I thought was a nice, simple way of explaining where the market is failing seniors. And so you can see from this that really the greatest needs when you just look in general are in the low income and middle income. You can look at where are subsidies available versus where can people afford private pay? Where are those gaps in housing? And then where are the gaps in care or in service? And so you can see in particular, and that's not to say that there are enough subsidies for extremely low. That's not the point of the slide. The point of the slide is that there are subsidies, although I'm sure we'll hear from folks that there is a gap in the level of subsidies available, but that there are subsidies available at extremely low income. There are subsidies available for housing at low income, but there's a gap when you're looking at care for the low income category. Then for middle income, there is a gap for both. And then when you're at higher income and you're able to afford private pay for housing and private pay for care. And so the areas that we would want to focus on in policy is this low income, middle income. But I would also say that there are clearly needs as well for extremely low income households. Okay, and then I do want to point out before we get into some questions, and we're going to go into housing types in a moment, but I want to pause and get some of your feedback first. But before I do that, I just want to point out that if there are people on this webinar or people that you know that are looking for help, that don't care about all these demographics necessarily, but want to find a house or want to find a home that they can afford or services that can help support them, there are some resources. So Salem for All Ages is a fantastic, they have a fantastic website. They're a fantastic program and initiative that's been working for, I believe it's been 5 years now. 2022 marks 5 years. And so I gave the URL there, and maybe Andrew, you could just post that URL as well in the chat for people so they can grab that easily. And the other thing is mass options. And so I gave the phone number for that. So that's 800-243-4636. And so if you are looking for help and for options, both for housing assistance and housing options, as well as assistance with service. These are two great resource or sites that you can find resources. All right, great. And if I'm going too quickly over this slide, just let me know, and I'm happy to go back to it. Okay, so let me pause and just ask you an open-ended question. We are going to go on in a moment, as I said, to housing needs and types of housing. So this is not the whole presentation, but I want to pause here and I want to first ask you this open-ended question about what resonates for you about the information that I just shared. And then just so you know, the next question I'm going to ask is what aspects of our findings surprised you or maybe didn't resonate or did you question? So this one is what resonated for you? What did we say that you're like, yeah, I get that. I see the data that, that Jen's presenting and it actually makes sense given what I see on the ground. And so this is just an open-ended question. So again, you can, go to the browser and type in a response, and you can also text in a response to that same number if you were using your smartphone, and just text in what resonates for you about these findings. It could be, as a few people in the chat said that elderly living alone was something that you see in the community, and that maybe that finding resonated for you. And so Andrew is actually, there's a little delay here because Andrew is behind the scenes actually monitoring this. Okay, so someone said no surprises. So now we're starting to see some things come through. So the ratio of people cost burdened and those isolated resonated. Very interesting how many are alone, and that 1,200 disabled, according to our estimates. Feels like a national problem, not just Salem. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Salem is not unique in these issues. I suspect the numbers are very similar in other communities across the country. Yes, I think that's true. Certainly not all communities, but I think that this is definitely part of a trend that older adults are living alone. More older adults are living alone, living longer, perhaps are widowed or alone for other reasons. Isolation is an issue, as well as cost burden, rising rents, especially in a community like Salem. All right. It all resonates, absolutely, what is seen on the ground. Troubling outlook for seniors and the numbers of cost burden. Things are much as I had expected. However, I did not expect the number of households below 20,000 was higher than anticipated. And low income and extremely low income seniors, the number living alone and isolated. Okay, great. So this is really helpful for me to see that the data that we just shared with you does resonate to some extent. I see the importance of being able to stay in the community you know well, which can ameliorate the issue of living alone, right? If you feel a connection and don't, even if you are living alone, but you have a connection in the community and meaningful engagement in the community, that can help ameliorate some of those issues. The lack of surprises in the categories resonated most strongly. We seem to understand our people, but what are the barriers? Yeah, great. Ways of tackling the alone problem. Great. Okay. So it looks like choices are starting to slow down here. And I also just want to make sure that I'm going at a good pace for the translation. And so, Andrew, if you're seeing that there's any issue with, going too fast over these, I know that last time we did this presentation back in November with the translators, things were going a little fast when we were going through the open-ended. So hopefully that's enough time to go through those. And we will have a full transcription of all of these. So if there's anything that, you missed as we were going through, just know that our summary will include a full transcription of all of your points here. All right. So now, I'm not sure. Maybe some of you will say, as you did before, nothing surprised me. It resonates with me. Let's talk about options and barriers. But what I do want to know, did anything surprise you? What aspects surprise you? Or do you question, as someone, astutely asked, who's being asked these questions? Where does this data come from? How representative is it of our community? And the truth is, it's based on sample size. So these are estimates. And so is it possible that some of these data have a large margin of error and some of it may not be 100% accurate? Yeah, that is possible. And so I always like to ask, is there anything that doesn't fit with what you're seeing on the ground? Is there anything that surprised you, but also anything that you question, and maybe you're like, that doesn't really seem right to me, and maybe there's not, but that's the sort of the nature of this open-ended question for you. And so Andrew, again, is just behind the scenes. So if you are typing in your answers, you don't see it right away. He is back there reading all of the answers that you give and one by one approving them to go slide. But I'm actually not seeing anything. So Andrew, are you not getting answers to this? It could be, oh, here we go. Okay, so someone was surprised by how many seniors are living alone, are living with so little income. Yeah, so the incomes were very low. Another surprise, mostly what surprises me is that only 40 Salem residents are on this Zoom meeting. Yes, I agree. It's always really hard to gather information. We don't want to not ask you these questions, though, and we're really very grateful for the 40 people who are here. We have many ways to participate in this project. We have a survey that's been live for a number of months and will continue to be live. We ask about senior housing needs in that survey. So if you haven't taken that, or if you feel like community that haven't taken it, please help us spread the word that this survey is available. That is one of the main ways that we are trying to reach out to greater numbers than who could come here on a public forum on a Zoom meeting. We also have a variety of other ways to give out to outreach to the community. There are different organizations, I believe North Shore CDC, as well as the Council on Aging, and other steering committee members, as well as city staff, are holding small meetings and office hours to try to reach harder to reach populations and folks that may not come on to a Zoom meeting like this. So I'm glad that you said that. And the real response here is we are so thankful for your time that you are here. And we are also trying multiple other ways to get more input into this process. And we really hope that you will help us spread the word, because it is important to this committee and to the city that we hear from as many people on these housing needs as possible. Someone else says, I was surprised by how few older adults are renters as opposed to homeowners. I am a renter myself. It would be it would be helpful to have more breakdown of ages. A 65-year-old may have different, yeah, that's true, may have different needs than an 85-year-old. Thank you for that input. That is very true. The age span are 65 to potentially 95-year-old. They're 30-year spans. Why? Yeah, so same thing. Why are we not breaking it down in more finer grained age? And that's a fair point. I wonder if the number of older people living / responsible for younger family or children continues to grow. Yeah, that's actually, that would be interesting to look at. And I think that we can look back at some more historical data and see if those numbers have changed about grandparents living with their grandchildren. All right, great. So it looks like these comments are slowing down. So I'm going to go ahead. And so, the next slide is just an ability for anyone who wants to raise their hand and to let us know if they want to speak about this at all. And we'll have another opportunity to do this at the end of the presentation after we talk about housing types for seniors. But I just wanted to pause here at kind of the halfway mark, or a little intermission. And what I'm going to do, as Andrew had suggested, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share so that if you are kind of stuck in that poll everywhere window, it will hopefully take that, full screen off of your screen, come down to the regular screen so you can kind of navigate back and forth. And if you do want to raise your hand, so I'm going to look now and see. I don't see anyone raising their hand. Oh, I do. I see one person. So,
and Patricia Zeiter is also raising her hand from our steering committee.
Oh, great.
Raising her physical hand.
Okay, I didn't see that. Patricia, why don't you go ahead?
Or you want to do it in here? You have to do the hand?
Yeah, did you want to speak, or should I go on to Deborah Geller is the next person with their hand raised?
Yes, I did want to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My concern, these figures are a surprise to many of the people who are here tonight. And these are concerned people. These people care. After a hard day of work, they're here at 6:00 at night. And I'm glad they're learning about these things. But the people who really need to learn about them are the people who say, I'm sick of hearing about affordable housing. I don't know whether this is true or not. And they go to public meetings and say, we don't need this. I don't want ADUs, etc. I think there has to be a more public campaign. And believe me, I'm on your committee. I know how hard you're working. I know that you're doing surveys, etc. But somehow this has to be in their face. The fact that 20% of the people in Salem have income of less than $20,000, or 55% less than $60,000. This is shocking news, really. And I think will change the attitudes that you need to have changed if you hope to get people in agreement with the great need for housing in Salem.
Thank you, Patricia. Excellent points. All right, so Deborah Geller, I see your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute so you can go ahead and share your thoughts on this.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually on the board of the North Shore CDC. And right now they are the ones that are doing some affordable housing. There's 2 projects right now that are making the segue. So one of the things that's really challenging is from the time of, say, either rehabbing a building or buying a property to be able to turn into senior housing can take up to 5 or 6 years. So that takes a very long time. If you are 80 years old and you're waiting for housing, low income housing, you're now 85. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to work with the federal government to try to help or advocate for this kind of funding to be really on more shortlisted. So to wait that long is a very long time. So we need to work with our state senators. We need to work with our federal senators. We need to work at a higher level to look at streamlining funding for projects that could be shovel ready. So, and also the community needs to also understand and get behind supporting the the buildings, they want to be doing a building right now that a lot of people in Salem, it's at the end of Lafayette Street, are not supporting that. So as a community, we need to come out and support organizations like the CDC, and also understand that the CDC is also for everyone and not just in the Point neighborhood.
Great. Thank you so much for that contribution, Deborah. All right. Is there anyone else who is looking to speak at this point? And again, we will have another time after we talk about housing needs. All right.
I see Patricia Small.
Oh, Patricia Small, go ahead. And then I'm going to call on Dean Rubin, and I see Liz Brandt and Christine Mador in that order. Patricia?
Yeah, I think a very good point was just made about the not understanding what it's all about, and that the CDC is not just for the Point. I've found a fair amount of that in folks that I've been talking to, that part of this is because there's a lot of advocacy on the part of people advocating for those who are at the extreme level of poverty. And then there's this whole, I call it the donut hole, just like in Medicaid and Medicare. There's a donut hole because there are people who are at that now 60% who will qualify for some of the affordable units. And there will be people at the 30% or below who can qualify for subsidized. And there's that group in between who gets left out. And those are the people that I'm hearing more and more. I see it on nextdoor.com. I hear it when people are talking to me. They're like, yeah, that's fine, but what about us? So, to get more out there, and I know that communication about this stuff it's not just particular to this unit, but it's something we really need to look at. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, so I have Dean Rubin next, and I'm just allowing you to unmute.
Hi, Dean Rubin here. I guess I'm dovetailing off of a couple previous speakers, not speakers, but those that have called in. I think there's a holistic approach to this. With the housing issue right now, affordable housing, as someone just said, it's hard to just turn it on in an instant. It's years away. And so holistically, years away, I know other committees will deal with this, but how do we get people to become more engaged in their own well-being? And what I mean by that is, how do we give them skills that they can get jobs? 1 in 5 earning less than 20,000. That's less than $10 an hour. And with today's labor market, I have to believe there are opportunities where they can make more than that. And so I guess I would just say that whatever comes out of this committee should dovetail into another committee about how do we give skills to folks that they can improve their own lot. So that's just my thought.
And clarify, that figure was not all Salem residents. That was older adults over 65 years old. All right. So now I have Liz Brandt is next. So let me go ahead and, sorry, I'm allowing you to talk right now. You should be able to go ahead and unmute.
Great, thank you. I wanted to check business owner on the survey, but I can't because I sold my business 5 months ago. Okay. But I wanted to say that one of the main reasons we lost employees was they couldn't find housing here. And couples in their 40s, younger people in their 30s, that was always a problem. So I think if the business owners could be brought around to realize that they would have a better time attracting employees if there was housing in Salem for everybody, it would be a lot better for all of us. And I see it in Ward 6. I see people advocating against every kind of housing project that comes up, and I'm always there saying we need housing, we need ADUs, we need more. And I think we're right by the train station, and people want to have their apartments and places to live, and as we build them, they should all be the design so that older people can move around in them easily with a wheelchair or whatever. There's a name for that. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a certain design the way the architects design the apartments so they can actually.
Yeah, universal design.
Universal design, that's what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go ahead and promote Christine Mador. Okay, you should be all set.
Hey everybody, Christine Mador. Lots of familiar names I've already heard from. And I know that this room is probably mostly folks who are already advocating for more housing in Salem or sympathetic to the issue. And I just want to say that one of the comments that I saw in the poll questions that really resonated with me is that they were surprised about how many seniors living alone there are in Salem, and being able to have an option for them to stay in a community could probably lessen that a sense of isolation, because they already have neighbors and friends and people they know around them. And I think that is such a really important point when we're talking to folks who may be opposed to more development or more homes built in Salem. It's just really about human dignity, and I think that people easily kind of default to the idea, yeah, of course we need more senior housing. But as I walk around the city with my kids, just even yesterday was a great example. I was walking my 3-year-old daughter to her friend's house by the common, and then there was a older lady who walked by, and she was just really taken by how cute my daughter was, and she was speaking Spanish to her. And I was like, those kind of interactions don't happen unless this woman has a place to live in Salem. So yes, we do need options for seniors to be able to live in Salem, but we also need all other types of housing. And it's really important that we try to put the message out there that we need housing for everybody, because it really benefits everyone. So I think there are people who say, yeah, we're for affordable housing, we're for senior housing, but when it impacts them or inconveniences them, if the housing construction project is near them, then yeah, they're totally against it. So I really want us to think community first when it comes to housing, that maybe there's some inconveniences and compromises, but overall this really benefits our community. And it's really difficult for people to get used to that idea. But I just wish that we could do more to help people hear these stories about how, these housing units that are being built that you see, there's real people living in there. And I just learned today, actually, that one of my coworkers' aunts, she just recently retired from Salem State after 30 or so years there. And she got an apartment at the Breakaway off of the Common. And she's so happy there. And we need to tell more of those stories. And I just wish that more and more people would be more engaged in this topic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I see one more, Grayson Ocasio.
All right, Jen, before Grayson speaks, can I just mention that if anyone is joining by phone and wishes to raise their hand, you can type *9. So if you're joining us by phone and you'd like to say something and you want to raise your hand, we'll see it if you press *9. Thanks.
Great. Okay, Grayson, you're on.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. So I wanted to speak about older members of the Latinx community that work in Salem, but that are unable to live in Salem. Many are having compounded difficulties that have to do with not only accessibility, but language, discrimination, the understanding of a culture that is vastly different from what they're used to, and not knowing specifically what is out there for them, whether it is because of language difficulties or simply fear of what's out there and, what can happen to them.
Yeah, excellent points. Thank you so much, Grayson. All right, so that's all I see at this moment. and again, we'll have another section in a little bit where we'll look for more hands. And so I'm going to go ahead now and share the screen again. Okay, and hopefully you're able to see the presentation again now. So now let's get into types. So we're going to start first with, I don't know why it just went blank. Hold on, let me pause it. I'm just going to stop the share for a second. For some reason, the screen went blank. And I'm going to exit the show, and then I'm going to go back into it. So it's always some kind of technical difficulty. Okay, there we go. And now I can go and share the screen again. All right, there we go. So this is showing you an inventory of housing for older adults, senior housing in Salem now. This is the inventory. So this is both senior, the top here is both senior and individuals with disabilities housing. And this is the whole top area here is Salem Housing Authority. And so some of you may be familiar with these properties already. We listed all of them here with the number of units, the address, and the type of unit. So we have 1 bedrooms at the James A. Dalton residence. I'm not going to read all of these, but just so you know what some of these abbreviations are. SRO means single room occupancy. And so this one has 12 SRO units. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as part of your housing types and housing needs. And then this is the J. Michael Ruan Congregate residence, has the 12 SROs, single room occupancy, as well as 2 2-bedroom units. And then the rest, I think, are pretty straightforward. We have different garden style, 1 bedrooms mostly. And then it just shows the different number of units for each of these. And then we have other senior housing that's not housing authority. So we have Fairweather Apartments is 127 units. We have Grosvenor Park, which is 120 units, and that's a private nursing home. The John Bertram House is 25 units. That's assisted living. And then there's also the Brookhouse Home for aged women, which is 36, and that's a residential care home. And so that's everything that we know about. Now, perhaps there are others that you know about that we missed. So please add that into the chat to let us know if you think that our inventory is missing anything. But this is what we were able to find in our research. And so
can you explain what garden style housing is?
Yeah, it's really a type of, actually, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know these particular developments or these particular units, but typically it means that there's a way, it's sort of in a lower rise apartment building, and you can go directly out into a courtyard area. And so typically they're designed so that, you sort of enter into a courtyard, and then there are multiple access points to different units along that courtyard. And it's just typically lower rise housing. So the one we're seeing now, actually, I didn't put which address this was, but this one is not garden style. This is just a kind of a multifamily style apartment building. And then garden style, I think we actually may have had an example on the opening slides, perhaps. Let me see if I can. Okay, this is a picture of Colonial Terrace, which is just, 2 stories with multiple doors. And let me just see on our inventory here if this is listed as garden style. So Colonial Terrace, 40 garden style units. So hopefully that helps giving you that visual. So it's kind of lower rise with multiple doors coming into usually a courtyard area. So hopefully that helps. All right. And So there are a total of 799 senior housing units that we counted on this inventory. That includes both the Housing Authority senior and disabled units, as well as the other senior housing units that we're listing here. So that includes the nursing home and the assisted living and the residential care home. And we also learned from the Salem Housing Authority that there's almost 7,600 elderly and disabled households on the wait list. And so that's now a centralized wait list for people who sort of check off what communities they want to live in. So that's not all Salem residents looking for subsidized housing in Salem, but it gives you a sense and the magnitude of the need compared to the number of units. So I'll say those numbers again, since they're not here on the slide. We have a total of 799 units listed in the inventory that we're showing on this slide, but we have almost 7,600 elderly disabled households on the wait list for Salem Housing Authority units. And that's a combination of the state units and the federal unit wait lists. So I repeated some of these figures here, but I added another one as well. So really the point here is that there's really a significant shortage of affordable housing options for older adults in Salem. There are close to 2,000 low and moderate income older adult households that are also housing cost burdened living in Salem estimated. These are all estimated numbers. So, and again, that term housing cost burden means that these households are spending more than 30% of their total income on housing costs. So there's over 2,000 estimated to be low moderate income living in Salem. And again, that low moderate income means at or below 80% of the area median income. There are about 7,600 elderly disabled households on the wait lists for public housing, and there are just under 800 senior and disabled units. So I also pulled out some preliminary data from the survey that's still live. And so these will not be the final results. We're really hoping that more people will continue to take the survey. It will be live until February 11th. So if you haven't taken it yet, or if you can help spread the words to other folks in the community, we do have the survey out in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And we're really hoping to get as many people as possible to participate. And again, it is anonymous. So I did just pull out some preliminary data though, because we do ask about senior housing needs. And the question here that I pulled out is, as we age, it may become harder to see, hear, and move around easily. How important are the following things when it comes to aging in your own home? And there was a long list of choices, and these were the top 4 so far to date. So home-based services, social services, units that are physically accessible, and physical improvements or modification to your existing home. And you can see the number of respondents for each of these. I just pulled out the extremely important categories here. When we finish with this survey and compile all the results, you'll see a much more detailed view. You know, there are more choices. Some people are saying things are not important, but this just gives you kind of a snapshot. So this is in order, as of the current results in the priorities for helping to age in the community. So home-based services, social services, units that are physically accessible, and physical improvements. And then we have open-ended questions as well that say, why are you, tell us more about why you're answering the way that you are. So I just pulled out a few of the open-ended questions to give you kind of a sampling of what we're hearing from people. So the first one says, I've seen several senior housing units in Salem, and it is my opinion that they are below standards. I know people that live in them and they have mice, takes forever for maintenance and for repairs, cracked sidewalks, extremely dangerous, especially for older handicapped people. As a couple without children, being able to have access to support systems as we age are important and part of the reason we'd like to buy a home in Salem. I would love for us to stay in our own home, but would like to have a separate entrance to our basement as an apartment, or turn our detached garage into a separate unit for a family member. So basically they're talking about an accessory dwelling unit, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I'm realizing I should pause a little more. Part of one of the challenges of being on Zoom is I can't see you, and I also can't see the interpreters who are trying to explain what I'm saying. And then the last one is, I am 76 years old and retired in excellent health. I prefer renting to condo ownership because of the unpredictability of assessments in condos. I love living in an intergenerational neighborhood. Much prefer to our retirement community. I can foresee a need for social services and home-based services as I age and lose some physical fitness. So this is, again, just a sampling of the things we hear, but it represents some of the main things that we're hearing from people so far in the survey. And again, these are just preliminary results. All right, so let's talk about housing options. And many of them, you've mentioned in either in your comments, in the chat, in the initial question, or things that we've spoke about to date in this webinar. But I just wanted to break them down for you. So home modifications to your existing home. And so on Salem's website, you do have a listing of housing rehab assistance. And I posted just a little snapshot of the different programs that are available now. Many older adults would like to remain in their housing units or their existing homes when they age as they're able, rather than move into higher levels of care. And so that's just really recognizing this. Now, certainly not everyone wants to remain in their existing home, but many older adults do. And so the types of home modifications that you can think about being needed, we just list some handrails, other accessibility improvements, and just, health and safety improvements as well. And then the next slide is talking about similar, how to help people age in their home, services, so home-based services. And the Salem for All Ages website, which I mentioned before, I listed it again here because it has a great page that lists a bunch of local services and organizations that work with older adults to help older adults access services to help them stay in their homes as they age. Okay. Service enriched or supportive senior housing. So this is not nursing home. This is not assisted living. This is, and I put a little clip with a definition here. When working with older adults, the purpose is simple: provide the services necessary to help them remain independent for as long as possible. And that's really to help seniors healthily age in place in the community. And so this is not necessarily about aging in your existing unit, but it's about having options to age within the community where you have the ability to remain independent, but you are part of a community and you have access to services. So that we call that service enriched or supportive senior housing. Accessory dwelling units, while not age restricted per se, they do provide options for seniors to stay in their home, help them pay taxes or other expenses of living in the home. And so you can also provide accessible options through an accessory dwelling unit to have an older adult move into potentially that unit, or have a caregiver live in the unit as well, or someone perhaps who is renting but also helps out with different needs of the home. There are situations where there's maybe not an official caregiver, but someone who rents the accessory dwelling unit or the ADU who may help with snow shoveling or mowing your lawn, or et cetera. So the accessory dwelling unit can be a very important option for helping community members, older adults, stay in their home as they age. And so we did ask, as part of the survey, if you own a single family home in Salem, would you consider creating a small apartment on your property to supplement your income or to house a family member or a caregiver for that matter? And so you see that there's a bunch of people said yes, a bunch of people said no. So there's definitely a number of people who would be interested in doing this. But the thing I actually found interesting was the yellow bar here, which is people saying they're not sure, please explain. And so what that indicates for me is that there's probably a need for more outreach around what are accessory dwelling units, how can you create one in your home, what does the ordinance that was relatively recently approved allow me to do with my home. And so that is something that is an option that could help older adults, but probably more awareness and outreach needs to be done. Another housing type would be congregate living. So this is living in a, it's usually relatively intimate space. It could be a larger single family home. It doesn't always have to be that, but that's the example that I pulled out here from the Barnstable Housing Authority as an example, the Captain Eldridge House, which is congregate living, where residents have their own bedroom essentially in this home. And then there's common space as well as services and a live-in caregiver. And so this is just a definition. Congregate housing for seniors refers to an environment where older adults live in private apartments or in a room, but share common space. So that could include dining room, kitchen, other areas that are common in the house. And this also helps a number of things, including having kind of integration into a community and less isolation, but it also supplies the ability for support services. And so, so I misspoke. In this definition, it says congregate living does not offer around-the-clock care. I have also seen congregate homes that do have a live-in resident caregiver. So I think that can vary. But you also can have other, specialists who come in, housing coordinator, help with daily chores, activities of daily living, and then other things. And this just gives some other examples of what this kind of congregate living situation can help with. Okay. There's also intergenerational housing, and we heard some people in the chat as well as through the survey talk about intergenerational housing. And we also talked about the grandparent, grandchild living situation as well in the data slide, one of the data slides that we shared. And so intergenerational housing can come in many different forms. I gave some examples here. Treehouse Foundation has a number of sites, including in, I think it's in the Amherst area, and they have a foster care service, and I don't know all the details, but that's kind of the nature of the Treehouse Foundation as just an example. And then this is just an article. People, communities bringing young and older people together. And there's, a number of different research and examples of intergenerational housing. Single room occupancy, especially to provide permanent housing that's safe and stable, and as people either at risk of housing vulnerability or transitioning out of being unhoused. This is very important for different ages, including for the senior population and older adults. And you do have some people will call it SRO. You do have single room occupancy. The Housing Authority I showed you on the slide earlier does have some units, but it seems that there is a need for more single room occupancy, more choices for permanent housing in Salem. And then there's just kind of both market rate condominiums or apartments that you can rent, as well as affordable and accessible options. So this is kind of a combination slide here, condos and apartments, including affordable and accessible options. And so this provides options for older adults to downsize, perhaps if they were living in a larger unit, perhaps a single family, giving them options to stay in the community as they age, including affordable options that are actually affordable at the price points that you need them to be. And so as you remember from one of the earlier slides, and if you were at the earlier presentation that we did in November, you'll also remember us saying that the low and moderate income housing that's typically built at the 80% of the area median income is not affordable enough for many of the households in Salem, including older adult households. And that was some of the income data that we gave you, half hour ago or so, about how many, most of those older adult households in Salem, so 55% make under $60,000 a year or less. And so just thinking about that, and then thinking about your actual accessible options. And then this slide is just about accessibility in general, which could be in multiple different types of housing. The examples that I'm showing here, well, one is not accessible, and the other this is just showing a single family house, but you can have accessible housing, of course. And someone on the call, now I forget who it was, I was writing down names, had mentioned universal design as well. And so these are just different levels of providing homes without barriers, or at least with less barriers, and homes that can be more easily converted to be accessible. And then there are kind of, was mentioned earlier, the more kind of traditional, when you think of aging, going into more institutionalized care. So, and there are different levels of those supportive care atmospheres. And so there's the assisted living, rest homes, and nursing homes, which just provide different steps for how much service you need and how much medical service one would need. And there's just a couple examples here. The John Bertram House is an assisted living housing, and then Grosvenor Park is a nursing home in Salem. Okay, so those are really just all the different categories of the types of housing that can be helpful. Some are geared specifically for seniors, and some are just housing types that seniors can downsize into. And so what we'd like to just ask you here, and in theory, you could choose all of these, but what I would like to say is if you could pick, 3 or 4 that you think are the most important options in Salem that you'd like to see more of, that would be more helpful to us than everyone picking everything. So if you can do that, you do have the option to choose everything. If, you really can't kind of prioritize among this list, but these are the different options that I just went over. And so we have choice A, support for home modifications in your existing home. B is services to help people age in their homes. C, service enriched and supportive senior housing. D, accessory dwelling units. E, congregate housing or congregate living, I called it there. F, intergenerational housing. G, single room occupancy and permanent housing. H, affordable and accessible apartments. I did break out here, even though on my slide I combined apartments and condos. Here I broke them out for you because I do realize that some people may feel we really need more rental options that are affordable and accessible. And then I broke out I with condos. We need more condos that are affordable and accessible. And so we're seeing lots of people still answering here, but what I'm seeing so far in the results is that H seems to be the most popular choice, affordable and accessible apartments. And then the next I have kind of tied with each other as support for home modifications to existing home. Now there's 3, accessory dwelling units and affordable and accessory condos are all showing at 13% right now. And then I have the next most popular choice here was F, intergenerational housing. And then I have services to help people age in their home and service-enriched supportive senior housing, both at 7%. Congregate living even less than that at 6%. And then it looks like a few people are also choosing single room occupancy and permanent housing. And this is just really an opinion poll of the folks that happen to be on this call. It's interesting for us to see what you're feeling are, the most important options, given the data that we shared, given the different housing choices that, we understand you to have, and given your own experiences in this community. And so it looks like the choices, even though the percentages have changed slightly, they're still in roughly the same order. Although I think that services to help people age in their homes went up a little bit since I read the numbers a moment ago. Okay, great. This is very helpful. And now we're going to just end the comment. We're going to go to just an open-ended comment in a moment, and this is really the end of the formal presentation. But we just want to ask why you chose the choices that you did in the last slide. If you could just elaborate on, so many people picked affordable and accessible apartments over condos, for example. There were a number of people who chose, ADUs and and helping people stay in their current home with home modifications. And so whatever choices you chose, we'd love to just hear more from you about why. We can take some educated guesses perhaps about why you chose the answers you did, but it's always more helpful for us if you can explain that. And so this is just an open-ended question that Andrew is just behind the scenes approving your answers as you type them in. And again, you can do this on your phone, or you can do this on your browser. And then in a moment, you can actually start raising your hand now if you think you would like to speak after this, and then we'll close the evening. But any comments or questions that you want to share, you can go ahead and raise your hand as I'm reading these questions or the responses that are starting to come in now. So one answer is congregate housing provides social benefits as well as independence. Think of dorm living encourages interaction while dividing privacy at the end of the day. So it gives you that ability to interact in common areas and then go off into your own small apartment or room at the end of the day. Personal experience with elderly people looking for options in Salem. So that was the reason that they maybe chose, the certain choices. And I don't know which choices they chose. Perhaps it was the affordable and accessible apartments. I'm not sure. Just thinking about the scale of the problem, I chose ADUs. So that's accessory dwelling units, congregate care, more apartments and condos, because it seems like those might scale up to meet the housing need. Feel like I need more info on what's feasible and barriers to these. Yeah, and we'll be looking and doing an analysis on, your zoning barriers, as well as, looking at opportunity areas, thinking ahead to some of the disabilities that come with age. So that I suspect you chose, we had a couple options that talk about accessibility. Because I may need it. Okay, so someone on the call feels like they may need this kind of housing. I chose congregate housing in part because in the late 1960s, as a college graduate hippie, that's the housing I had, and I enjoyed it greatly. Just renovated our home for my parents as they age and my own impending knee surgery. It is very expensive to renovate a single family. That is why I chose financial assistance. Need for rentals increasing, but rental stock is decreasing rapidly, right, with condo conversions in particular. Because it's easier to budget for rent on a fixed income and not have the unexpected expenses of home ownership when you need to maintain a unit, as an example, where your taxes go up. In terms of providing holistic solutions for the overall housing crunch, I think options that serve seniors who want to downsize has the ability to also create housing stock for families looking to upsize. Yeah, that's a good point. So some of these options are not just senior oriented. They can benefit multiple populations and multiple household types. Residents can stay in their homes and move elderly parents in. Also, so residents can age in place. So I'm assuming that you may have chosen the accessory dwelling unit option, and maybe also the home modification option. Many elderly would prefer to stay home, and having outside support goes a long way. So you're probably talking about the home-based services. Some may need the money from sale of their home or not want to take care of the facilities of a house. Rental gives them flexibility to maybe move where children are. I made 2 responses. With more accessible, affordable units available, seniors would be more likely to sell their homes and remain in their community. There are a number of supportive and thriving community benefits from multi-generational housing. Great. In terms of helping seniors to maintain the dignity and purpose that comes with independence, affordable housing stock versus financially supported housing is more effective. The idea of elderly residents trapped in family houses. Great. These are, really clear and very helpful. And I hope that I'm pausing enough for our lovely interpreters. Okay, good. So let's go ahead. It looks like things are slowing down in the written responses. And so let's go ahead, and I'm going to take the slides down so things are a little easier to see. But really, this is just open-ended comment. If you have a question, if you wish that we would look into other data or other housing options that you'd like to talk about that maybe we overlooked, or if you wish to speak more about your opinions on these issues, if you can, I'm going to stop the share. If you can just go ahead and raise your hand. And I actually don't see anyone raising their hand right now. So it's also, okay, Liz, I see you. So if you do want to raise your hand, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and allow Liz to talk. And so Liz, you should be able to unmute now.
I as a house call vet, I saw a number of the housing for senior citizens in Salem, and it was not impressive. It was sad to see where, I mean, these garden style apartments sound just so beautiful, but they're not.
In terms of condition, are you talking about?
It's not kept up. It's, you know, it's not even looking clean. They're rough. They're really beat up. So just the units that we do have, they're substandard. They're really, really substandard, in my opinion, as a house call vet.
It's a great observation, and I know that it's very difficult for housing authorities to get the assistance that they need to really maintain and upgrade units. I also know that Salem Housing Authority does have a maintenance and rehab plan, and I don't know that anyone from the Housing Authority is on this call, but it's a good point nonetheless. And I'm not trying to, sound defensive. I just know that it's an issue of funding and not an issue of will. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate you participating.
And I was going to read out a comment from Councilor Love McLean in the chat, a question. He says, we saw an earlier breakdown of senior occupancy that accounted for renter versus owner, household versus non-household. Do we know what percentage of senior residents are receiving care versus independent?
I don't think we have that data. I don't know if Salem for All Ages in their study and their work perhaps has some sense. I know that they provide a list of resources, but I'm not sure if they know how many people are receiving care. Okay, are we getting another comment here? Yeah, I see a bunch of comments here. I see someone posting here. I see a lot of objections to bigger housing developments being the height does not match the neighborhood. But then I see Beverly, the town of Beverly, or the city rather, is able to build bigger, taller buildings, especially at Rantall Street. And now one planned for the end of the street right before the bridge. When they started building the taller buildings, they had only a few existing tall buildings. Is this what Salem needs to do? I feel like otherwise that's always going to be the argument that shoots down our ability to build buildings with more units. Taller buildings with an elevator would be so helpful. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I know we have lots of comments in here, and I'm not going to be able to go through all of them in the chat. It looks like there, could be dozens, but we'll, just so you know, those will all be part of the written record and the transcript of this meeting. So we won't lose your comment, even if we don't read it tonight. Andrew, were there any Q&A questions that we should go over before we wrap up?
Well, there was a couple that we've answered in the Q&A. Dean Rubin asked, how different are Salem statistics than the U.S. population as a whole earlier on in the evening? And I think you talked about that a little bit. And then also a question about whether Salem is able to offer real estate tax relief for homeowners willing to build ADUs specifically for older adults. And that's something that Amanda answered in the Q&A as well. The city submitted a home rule petition that would allow for a tax exemption on affordable ADUs, and it's being considered at the state level. But it would be for any tenant, not just for older adults. So that's something seems to be in the works.
Right, that's great. And I see Philippe, you have your hand raised. Go ahead. I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi Jen, everybody. Thanks so much. I keep hearing something that keeps tying itself together in a really unique way. This idea of density plus senior needs, plus multi-generational needs. It's those three really do go hand in hand. I mean, you don't have to build a large building for seniors to just, as I've heard from a lot of people complaining oftentimes about senior housing, for me to go die in, right? You need to build housing to live, for living. Housing shouldn't be storage for humans. It really should be a space for us to enjoy ourselves no matter what age we are. And this idea of combining these three things together is so well-rounded, I think, and I keep hearing folks putting them individually in individual buckets, and I keep just thinking, what a great community that could look like, where, it's not even floor by floor. It's, in every floor there's somebody of a different age, so that, Christine Dory's comment can become more persistent even within the building that you live in, so they don't have to go to the common to enjoy that experience that I've also experienced. An older person coming up to my 1-year-old daughter and being like, "Oh my God, you're so cute," right? I don't have that in my own neighborhood here at the Point, because a lot of people around me are a little younger, at least in my immediate vicinity. But it is something really important to think about. What is the positive impact that density can bring on ensuring that we have multi-generational housing for living, not for storing ourselves only? Because it'd be great to just have housing, but if the point of living in them gets beat out of it, I do wonder whether we've built the best methodology of housing. And so I just wanted to bring that up as like a great way to think about the intersectionality of all these issues and how they can kind of work with each other. I keep thinking of perhaps, how great would it be for there to be a daycare center in a building where, seniors are also congregating, so that my 1-year-old can perhaps have a day a week where she goes on over to the senior center and plays with folks and learns from them. Really, and it's something that I've seen a few papers on. There haven't really been as much research on this in the US at least, but a few papers across the world on multi-generational living, right? Not multi-generational housing only, but multi-generational communities that are really well integrated, and the benefits that brings to the younger folks who have their elders to learn from, and folks who can see the hope of the future as they impart their knowledge, wisdom, and history and life to a younger generation that's to come up next, and the value in that. So I think that's really something that I think we ought to bear in mind as a committee, and as we move forward on this housing production plan. What is the interconnectivity of all these different issues that we've been talking about?
Yeah, this is so great. I love pointing out the intersectionality of these issues. Very, very astute. Well, thank you. We are really wrapped up. I don't see any other hands unless I'm missing anything. Andrew, you can tell me if I'm overlooking anything. But I really appreciate your time and the energy that you put into this. There are, so much to this issue that, perhaps we just glossed on the surface tonight, but I really appreciate you just spending the time to think about these issues. It's really important in our work as we're starting to think of strategy ideas to consider the needs of older adults, as well as to consider the intersectionality of all of the needs in the Salem community, as many of you had pointed out. And so, Cassie, do you just want to say a few words in closing?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I just want to thank everybody for coming this evening. We really appreciate all your input that you gave us. And just as a reminder that we do have that survey available, and we do have the meeting in a box, and staff is also here to answer any questions that you might have in the days to come, and that the recording will also be available on the project website if you'd like to share that as well.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.